How do we start healing our nation? How do we deal with these racial wounds, these dysfunctional police departments and city councils, these scams that are being run not just by business but by small towns where they're just basically extracting all the money from us, all these kind of things? What do we do? Claudette in Altadena, California. Hey, Claudette, what's up?
I don't know. I'm just so disgusted with all of this nonsense.
Yeah.
For some reason, white people seem to think they're privileged. They're better than everybody else, and it seems like it's always been that way. Everywhere they've gone in the world, they've conquered every ethnic group they've conquered. They're on the top, and everybody else is on the bottom. And until that attitude changes, I don't think anything will ever change. I really don't.
I think you're right, and I've been struggling with this one for almost 2 decades.
You've been talking about white privilege.
Yeah, but
white people don't understand that.
I know, and
that's part of the problem.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, and I personally don't think this is genetic. I think it's cultural. But because I don't think that obviously racial characteristics are passed genetically, but there's for race. There are genes for skin color and hair type and all that kind of stuff. But I've been trying to figure out, why is it that white people are like that? And you go back and you read Daniel Quinn's book, Ishmael, which is a novel about a talking gorilla who tells this young man about the history of the world. And he points out that for the 180,000 years that humans were on Earth, up until 10,000 years ago, we were all hunter-gatherers, and we all lived relatively egalitarian lifestyles. Women were mostly in charge of things. The entire world was seen as sacred. Now, obviously, this is kind of an idealized vision. There were places where life was really, really rough too. But actually, history bears out, the noble savage of what's his name. That pretty much all of us. And then 10,000 years ago, when we started growing food, when the agricultural revolution happened and we started growing crops, got the idea, hey, I can lock up the food during the season when things aren't growing. And that was the rise of kings and queens and lords and ladies and all that, because they were the ones who locked up the food. And so the longer period of time a society has where you can't grow food, the more intense is the pressure and opportunity for people to become those, I'm the king because I locked up the food folk. It means that the farther north you go in latitudes, the farther north you go up into Europe and up into northern Asia, 2 things happen. One, people's, over a 30,000 year period, which is how long this appears to have been happening, 30 to 50,000 years. Number one, people's skin lightens. But number two, they're in these environments where for half a year in the far north, 3/4 of the year, there's basically no food except the food that was grown during this really short growing period that Ralph has got all locked up in his basement. So we've all got to go supplicate ourselves in front of King, Ralph, who's declared himself king of Norway or something, 500 years ago. And this lock up the food, and nowadays, nowadays, oil and money you could substitute them for food in this equation, right? In order to live now, you not only have to have food, you have to have transportation, and our food comes from oil and all these kind of things. And so this has been a part of white culture since the beginning of agriculture, whereas people who live on the equator, which is where people tend to have darker skin, you can grow year-round. So there's much less kingdom making. Make sense, Claudette?
Yes, it does.
And I think that might be the original sin. And in fact, if you read the book of Genesis, there's 2 creation stories in Genesis. And I believe one was written by a hunter-gatherer tribe, and the other was written by an agricultural farmer tribe. Because one of those creation stories is against growing things. And it's the one of where Cain and Abel, and Abel was the herder. He sheep and things. He was not growing things. He was not part of the agricultural revolution. And his brother Cain was the farmer. And
Right.
they bring their, Abel slaughters a lamb and Cain cuts up a bunch of vegetables and they put them in front of God, and God disses Cain's vegetables and says, I don't like your vegetables. And so Cain kills Abel because of that. Well, what was the meaning of that? Why would God say that? There are a lot of really serious scholars who suggest that stories are told by metaphor in the Bible, that what that means is God doesn't approve of growing things. The agricultural revolution was a mistake. We should have stayed as hunter-gatherers, and we could develop technology in other ways. But we should have had these more egalitarian societies, because when you go to agricultural societies, and particularly as you start going into the climates where there's no food production for part of the year, you are creating a situation where you're going to end up with an overclass and an underclass.
I agree.
What do you think?
Wholeheartedly.
Yeah, so that's
what we need to work on.
That's the best theory that I can come up with. But I don't think anybody's going to go, oh yeah, let's roll back 10,000 years of world history. Roll back But so in a more contemporary sense, I think we've got the problem of basically legacy. That white people have had privilege in this country for 400 plus years, and there's a legacy of that causes white families to pass along not only money, but also, cultural knowledge, how systems work, who's connected to whom, hey, this friend can get you a job, that kind of thing. Whereas people of color are way down the line on that, not having access to everything. And so that's where, I think an immediate response to this should be economic, and we should go back to 40 acres and a mule. I mean, figure out a way, not that literally, but figure out a way to increase the wealth and level of education.
I agree with you.
There you go. Okay.
Got to start somewhere, and maybe that's a good place to start.
I agree. Claudette, thank you very much for the call. It's great to hear from you. And I mean, this is a challenge for all Americans. And as an earlier caller said, white Americans, you think you can just sit around and watch the police beat the bejesus out of black people and it's not going to happen to you? I mean, just wait until the Reagan economy causes you, white people, to lose your job and then lose your home and end up homeless, and the cops come through that part of town, right? We'll be back.